Those of us who believe in God or gods or the supernatural, or that there is a deeper nature to things, we like to think that everything has an order to it, everything makes sense, and that everything is fair. Whether you believe that God has a place for us once we die, if we act correctly, or that there is grace and that there is mercy through that grace, that God grants grace to people and can do it for whatever reason. You don't have to necessarily qualify for it, but that it is just unconditional mercy. Or whether you believe in karma and how it operates, that we all get our end rewards, and we all reap what we sow as a result of past actions in this life and in former lives. Even in most karmic understandings, systems, there's still an understanding of grace and mercy and spontaneous granting of this mercy and grace, regardless of us deserving it or us earning it. We want to be comforted. These things, they exist, but we want to be comforted by God, and a lot of the time we're frustrated because if grace exists, if mercy exists, why aren't we getting it when we need it? Why aren't we comforted by God? If God controls everything, if God could give us that grace, give us that mercy in an instant, why doesn't God give us that grace or mercy? And why, no matter how I try so hard, why don't things work out? Why don't I feel better? Is there really an order? Is there really a mercy? Is there really a grace to the universe, to God, if I am in this pain, emotionally, physically, or struggling in life in some way? We get frustrated with God because we want to be comforted by something that controls the strings to everything and could comfort us, has the power to. God operates on a grander timescale and in a vaster cosmos than our immediate incidents of pain, unfortunately. In Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta, and Vedanta is kind of a oneness philosophy in Hinduism, but in Advaita Vedanta, it's not so much that you have to reach enlightenment, that you have to reach moksha. It's something that you already have. You just need to realize it. It's kind of like, imagine yourself in two different perspectives. One perspective, you're looking down from an observation post onto a maze. And there are doorways in this maze to get out of the maze. And you see a man blindfolded, and he's stumbling about, going through the maze, missing all of these open doors that could let him out of the maze. And, he would be able to see that if he didn't have the blindfold on. And you're just waiting for him to take off the blindfold. He could reach up and do it. His hands aren't tied. He could reach up and take that blindfold off at any second. But he doesn't seem to know that the blindfold is on. So you're waiting for him to take it off so that he could see the door all of the doors out of the maze, and so that he could see the maze for what it is. Now imagine you're that man lost in a maze and you don't know why you can't see, but you can't see. And you have no idea that you have a blindfold on. You can't feel it. It doesn't feel like you have a blindfold on. It just feels like your face. It just feels like your body, like that it's just you, that there's nothing blocking you there, but you can't see. And you can't work your way out of this maze that you're stuck in. No matter where you go, you keep on bumping into walls, or you keep on going in various routes through the maze, but there doesn't seem to be a way out. You keep on going back to what feels like the beginning, again and again. Now, from the position of God, higher beings, angels, spirits, looking down at us, wandering around the maze, not awake to who we are, not realizing that we're also God, that we're free, that we just don't know it, watching us, observing us, and helping us here and there, but knowing that this is part of the game and it's part of the journey. And no matter how much suffering that person's going through, it is their blindfold to take off. And then, of course, we all feel like we're that man in the maze. We don't know why we can't make things work. We don't know why we can't get out of this trap of life, or these emotional problems, or the suffering that we're in. We try and we try. We just can't quite get out of it. And we don't feel like there's anything blocking us, that there's anything making us blind to the possibilities, blind to the exits out of this maze of material life, of suffering, of emotional pain, of losing people, of going to work day in and day out, struggling emotionally, struggling through every day, throughout our lives, in all the various ways that we struggle. We don't feel like there's anything there holding us back. But strangely enough, it's as simple as reaching up and taking off the blindfold. It's that simple. It's right there. That's the stance of Advaita Vedanta. If we would just realize it, we already have that enlightening. We already have that liberation. We just have to realize it. And it's almost like we all have this beautiful pearl of wisdom, of soul, and of personhood. And there's so much beauty in that pearl, but it's covered by all this dirt, all this mud, all this muck. It takes turning it around in your mind, working it, until you can expose the beauty of that pearl. That's what meditation is. That's what spiritual practices are. We already have that pearl. We're not trying to attain anything that we don't have. We're just polishing off the dirt that has accumulated for whatever reasons, from former lives, from assumptions in this life, from our upbringing in this life, from our experiences in this life. All of it's mud covering the pearl. You can call it our soul, but this opportunity is the pearl, personhood. We just have to turn it around enough. We have to think enough. We have to think in the right ways and polish what we already have to see the beauty of who we are and this opportunity that we have. There's this old story of a washerman in India, in a village, worked in a village. Now he would gather everybody's clothes from house to house, from village hut to village hut. He did the service where people would pay him, and he would take all their clothes from them, put them on his donkey, and go from house to house, gathering all the clothes, putting them on different parts of the donkey, and then he would go to the river. Let's call it the Ganga. Go to the Ganga and wash the clothes. Now, there's a tree near the Ganga that he would tie his donkey up at. And one day, after gathering all the clothes and going all this way to the Ganga, and then going to the tree, he realized that he didn't bring the rope with him. And to go all the way back to where he started, before all those houses, to gather the rope, there wouldn't be enough time to wash the clothes and take them back. But at the same time, if the donkey wasn't tied up at the tree, the donkey would walk off. So he was fretting about this at the tree, and he called over to a woman who was walking nearby, called over to her and, asked if she could wash the donkey or if there was something that she could do. She's like, I don't really have time, but, you can just go through the motions of tying the donkey to that tree and the donkey will stay there. He's like, what? She's like, yeah, just do everything that you do with the rope around the tree and tying it. Just act like you have the rope and go through all the same motions. He's like, okay, I'll try this. And the woman walked off, and he acted like he had the rope. He got it off the donkey. He went over to the tree looking at the donkey, act like he tied the rope around the tree, did a few knots, just miming it with his hands, and then he started gathering all the clothes off the donkey and started walking to the river. Looked back, donkey stayed. Looked back, donkey stayed. Started washing the clothes. Now the donkey's still by the tree, but the tree's far off. He looks over. Yes, the donkey's still there. Washes all the clothes, brings them all back, puts them on the donkey. Then he gets on the donkey and says, "Hut, hut." Donkey doesn't move. "Hut, hut." Donkey still doesn't move. And so he gets off, can't quite figure out what to do. The woman's coming back from the other direction, and she sees that he's having some kind of trouble. And he says, "The donkey won't move now. What do I do?" And she said, "Just act like you're untying it from the tree. Mime the motions of untying the knots and putting the rope back on the donkey's back, and he'll think he's untied." My man's like, "Why didn't I think of that?" And then he goes to the tree and unties all the fake knots, moving his hands in all the right ways on all these knots, taking the rope that's not there from around the tree, and then puts it back on the back of the donkey, just going through all the motions, and then gets on the donkey, says, "Hut, hut," and then the donkey goes off, and he's riding the donkey back the way he came. Now, what's the purpose of the story? What does it mean? So, the mind is the donkey. The soul, the person, everything that all of us, everything that we are gathered together, we are that person. Now, the mind is such a small part of us. It's a minuscule part of us, and we think we are the mind because it feels that way, but it's just an area that our consciousness kind of occupies. It's a very small area. Our consciousness is very big and very powerful, but the mind itself is a very small area, a very small part of us that the consciousness occupies. It's not very intelligent. The mind, combined with the ego, it's not very smart, and it's just kind of stupid, like a donkey. Worship, spiritual practices, meditation, reading books about God, learning, hearing words about God from someone, watching YouTube videos about God, Vedanta, let's put that in there too. Kind of the same thing, but all of this is you miming the motions of untying the donkey from the tree. All of these things that you do in the mind, with the mind, before the mind, through the mind. All of these things that you do in proximity to the mind, showing the mind, rolling these ideas around in the mind, training the mind. All of it is untying, all of it is our entirety, untying those knots that don't exist on that tree. The mind makes us feel like we're tied, that we're limited, that we have all of these fears, and that all of this suffering won't end. And it feels like it's tied to that tree. It feels like it's limited. So we have to do all of these spiritual things in order to untie these invisible knots that don't exist. Before we realize, we feel our soul, we personify ourselves, and we accept this opportunity. And we undo that blindfold that we could have taken off at any point along the way. Sometimes we have to go, most of the time, unless you're incredibly just born a very blessed individual, we have to go through these motions. But once again, you're not gaining anything that you don't already have. But spiritual practices, learning about God, reading books, watching videos, praying. It's all necessary because the mind is not naturally honed. And even though we have enlightenment already, we have liberation already, it's not obvious. That's why we have to do all of these things, but we already have it. There will come a time, there always comes a time at the end of our lives when we realize that all the things that we worried about, they weren't that important. And after we pass, kind of looking at ourselves, having been a body, been that life for a little while, once we're no longer confined, we realize that that maze was entertaining. It was interesting. It was fun. Even the terrible things were fun. We got to play being bound when we weren't really bound. We got to watch that movie and play that character in that movie, even though we didn't realize it was a movie. Afterwards, we realized that was entertaining, all of it. Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. This is the only time that God gets to act like she's bound, gets to act like she's separate, gets to play the game of being human. And every single life, every single person is a unique opportunity to do that. We might not feel that in day-to-day life. We may not feel like we're God. We may not, even in your belief system, if you don't believe that you're part God, at least believe that you have a soul, and understand that the soul is just a piece of God. That piece that gets to act like it really is separate for a time when it's not, before it gets to meld back. And don't fear losing the person that you are, or fear that you won't be remembered, or fear that you haven't accomplished enough, or that you won't accomplish enough. All of these fears are momentary. All of these fears are unwarranted. Nothing is forgotten. Your soul, it got to be this person for a little while. That's what matters. Not societal standards. Not what people demand of you, and not what you worry about. Do your best, but realize that there is nothing that you have to accomplish. And in the end, it's going to be okay. Thank you very much for watching. Like this video. Feel free to leave a comment. That helps out the channel as well. And share this video wherever you like. At any rate, thank you very much for watching, and I hope all of you have a wonderful day.